Another day, another episode.
Yeah.
It's been hot out. It's cooled down a little bit, but hot, almost as hot as Germany burning their potential future treasury.
Yeah.
Germany, I think, is about done, or if they haven't finished already, burning all of their Bitcoin off. And in hindsight, this could go down as an interesting chapter of what could have been for Germany.
Yeah.
It's weird to think about all that $2 billion worth of in today's price of Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, someone posted. They said that I think it was Justin Beekler, Beecher, Justin. Hi, Justin. If you're watching this. He said, yeah, there's a lot of people saying, oh, Germany's just shooting themselves in the foot. There's a law that says if you seize assets, you have to sell them. There's not like it's not like they had a choice. Like, well, hey, maybe we should hang on to this Bitcoin we seize and all this criminal activities.
They could sell it and then just buy it.
Well, they could. Yeah, I mean, they could just cycle through and just buy some new Bitcoin with seized funds. But I'm sure there. I mean, like there's laws about everything we can do. Like I can't even fucking deprecate a file cabinet without filing paperwork.
We seize property, and even if there's, regardless of anything or utility or interest, there's depending on what it is, so much time goes by and the case is done, we destroy it.
Right.
And it's perfectly
good stuff.
It's just, we can't.
Yeah, we can't.
I've donated stuff to charities and been like, this is, something that is not of concern, and we just can. We give away the money, so it's not a waste.
Right.
But we can't keep it, and I get that. But crazy Bitcoin selling that the price. Meanwhile, it bounces, but it has all that selling from Germany hasn't horribly negatively affected anything because the ETFs has rolled in and people are buying. So.
Yeah, I'm pretty price agnostic, right? Like I don't.
Yeah.
I literally don't give a shit anymore. Like when I was shitcoining, dude, it was I was on charts. I probably spent 8 to 10 hours a day looking at charts. And no exaggerate, just literally click on a different thing, scroll in, scroll out, just click on a different thing, read an article, go back. It was just like this obsession, this weird, just tracking every little goddamn move,
And if you're swing trading, I find it interesting, but man, it does preoccupy a lot of mental energy and even emotion. Why? Up, down.
Constant.
Yeah.
Well, Matt Cratter actually put out a great video. Every video he puts out is great as far as I'm concerned. But he said, post capital gains tax, you'll find you're just not going to beat DCA, right? And that was 100% my experience. I was swing trading. I'm like, man, I'm doing pretty good. And then, the tax man came and went, oh, I'm doing pretty good except for taking 30% out of my P&L. So,
yeah.
Okay, so I increased everything by about 8 to 10% and took on massive amounts of risk and put my capital at risk. And I spent 8 to 10 hours a day dicking around on charts. So how far am I ahead? If you pencil that out, if you say my times were $60 an hour and I lost a bunch of money just trading, right? You just... So yeah, kind of pointless. I still use that as like we were talking about last week, I still use that shit to time my buys, right?
Yeah.
I still kind of go, okay.
Dip buy-in.
Yeah, I don't just blindly buy dips, right? I wait until I have a buy signal to buy things. There's no sell signal now, so that makes it easy. But at least I know when I'm buying that it's most likely on an uptrend, at least even a brief one, which always, to me, psychologically, just, if I go tell somebody, hey, now's a good time to buy Bitcoin. I like to be right.
I know. I hate telling people that. It should be pretty good. And then they're it goes down in their short view on it all. And I'm like, a week or two later, I'm going,
yeah.
Well, hold. And they're like,
right.
I thought this was going to go up.
Yeah.
You told me Bitcoin was going to go up.
Hey, great.
Well,
tip, dude.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, appreciate it. You just taught me how to turn $100 into $80. Thanks.
Yeah.
I could have figured that out on my own.
When am I going to be a millionaire? You said I'd be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Where? In fiat land? No.
Well, you might be. What do you think of power law? You ever look at power law stuff?
I read a long article. Well, so Bitcoin power law?
Yeah.
I just, last night on Medium, so I met that guy. I cannot remember his name. He's got...
Connie,
whatever his name is. He was at the Portland Bitcoin conference. Bitcoin
really?
is for everyone. I was having lunch. It was like near pizza day. We were having pizza for lunch day.
Was he a nice guy?
I sat next to him and talked to him for a while, and he was showing me all these charts. And I was feeling a little busy and tired at the time, and I was starving. I was eating, and I just talked to some people at Swan and stuff. And Giovanni sat down next to me, and we were chatting, and he was showing me his power law. And I have to admit, I don't fully understand it. I get the long arc of trend and how it's been fairly accurate, like 95% accurate on price,
if you
fluctuations,
bubbles and dips, but sure. Yeah.
So, very smart guy. He's like a physicist or a
neurophysicist or neuro. I think he's a neuroscientist. I thought he was in neurology. I might be mistaken. I read his article as well, but
yeah. So,
anyway, tell me more.
The Abundant Mining Company that was there hosted him on a podcast they had a few weeks ago, I want to say, and he went all into it. And again, not to say you got to be a genius to understand the concepts, but following some of it when he's talking about the math, I'm just keeping up with the concepts. I don't know math that well to the extent that he's studied it and writes about it. So they got math formulas and all that, but you're probably going to know more on the concept part than I do. But as far as you see that rainbow graph, logarithmic, and where it's followed the ups and downs, and it's following these trends and the market cap potentials and stuff, and that I think the punchline being that in this cycle, this halving cycle, the price could be he thought 240,000, and then conservative estimates are 160,000 was if it follows that trend. As a person, smart guy, really nice guy, passionate about what he's been studying and learning, and so talking a lot about it, but easily, like I'm being friendly and learning, and he's telling me stuff, and I'm going, oh boy, I feel like I wish I was smarter. Yeah. But he's a smart guy, and he's written a lot about it.
Well, yeah, that was, I saw somebody posted, the reason I ask is because someone posted, and they said something about, I think it was that guy, Joe Burnett. I comment on his stuff a lot because I think he makes great videos. He works for Unchained, I think. Mm-hmm. But he's a smart kid, and he posts interesting videos, and I'm always sort of like wanting to help repost his stuff because I think it's a good message. I think his thoughts on things are good. But he said, I like stock to flow and both the stock to flow and power law models. And I said, these are much ado about patternicity. Or no, what did I say? All models are wrong. Some models are useful. These models are silly. That was it. I mean, just a little throwaway comment. I didn't think much. But the Giovanni, whatever his name was, posted shows, some snarky little thing about shows how much of an idiot you are, what you don't know, or some fucking thing. I don't know. And so I responded saying, well, okay, what falsifies your theory? And then he said something, well, with the theta value, if it reaches zero, then I can say the power law has been falsified. So the only thing that can falsify your model is something that happens in the future, maybe. And even in his big article, if you read it, he said, well, it can predict bubbles. And I go, well, then how come your bubbles are outside your rainbow? So if you discount deviations from the theory, then the theory is correct. Mm-hmm. Well, you can't just leave out. Like if we stopped your power law model in 2017 at the peak of the bubble, you say, oh, power law doesn't work. Because clearly prices far exceeded the model.
It covers a range of was it 2017 forward?
No, he says, because I saw a video with him, because after he started getting snarky with me, I'm like, all right, I guess I'll just go and entertain. Maybe this guy is onto something, I don't know. I read his article, and he's got like but the problem is I'll break it down as simply as I can. Let's see if it makes any sense. I doubt it will.
It's probably not you. It's going to be me.
Well, no. I mean, it's I think his you remember Plan B when Plan B was making all his little model predictions and all this shit, and then 2022 happened, and Plan B's model's fucking broken. Oops. Mm-hmm. But all he did was add a new color to his rainbow and go, nope, it's still in play. Plan B model is just no, it's not. You fucking asshole. It just broke. You have zero predictive capability over USD price. Nothing. People have been running this hustle for 200 years. I got this fancy fucking model. You're not going to understand a single word of the math that I'm going to throw in your face. Even when bunks the mathematicians, they're going to argue about whether or not my model is correct in its parameters and assumptions, but they're never going to actually touch on the predictive capacity of this thing because they're going to be dickering so much about the math. So no one's ever really going to truly unpack what I'm saying, and I'm going to get some fame and fortune out of it.
There's that barrier to criticism because are you really that good of a mathematician to know how to argue against it?
Well, it's not a math argument. That's why the mathematicians will argue about whether or not the assumptions are correct or whether or not your parameters are correct or the things you're tracking are correct. But they never really just assault the underlying function or the underlying premise. And in my case, I said, well, bubbles are deviations. So like if you stop the model in 2017, model's broken. Because clearly 2017 was a bubble. It broke out of the little rainbow. It broke out of the range. If you just stop the model right there, power law is not working right now. This has deviated significantly from what the power law predicts. And then it comes back and he goes, oh, see, no, it's just a range thing, and it accounts for bubbles. And I go, no, it doesn't. It did not account for bubbles. Then predict the next bubble.
Mm-hmm. And it's, time being unidirectional, you can create great tracking, math that sees the patterns going back. And really, it'll take time moving forward in the future to see, does this pan out? And there's so many outlier type potential things.
That was the reason for my question. What falsifies your theory?
Mm-hmm.
It says it's going to happen in the future. Oh, so you get to just parrot this thing until it's broken, is basically what. And then when it does come, you're going to come up with some reason why it still works, because just like Plan B did.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you stop the model in the 2018 bubble, or the 2017 bubble, you stop it at the 2015 bubble, you can see in his little rainbow chart that he throws up, there's bubbles that exceed the range of the thing. He goes, well, it counts for bubbles because of this and that. And I go, some mathy bullshit that he's coming up with.
What I was reading was within 95%, there were outliers in the peaks and the dips, but 95% it was accounting for it.
Yeah, which is complete bullshit. I mean, it's like, there's somebody somewhere that will say their astrology chart tracks things within 95% accuracy. The problem is do power law in Turkish lira. Does it work? And so his response to that is, it's the flying cow theory, and gravity is neutralized because a cow flew in a hurricane. That proves that gravity doesn't work. I go, that's completely irrelevant. What you're talking about is you're making a prediction on something that has infinite supply and is not regulated. It's not a biological process. The creation of USD fiat is not biology. It's not a natural system. It doesn't just create because of network effects or anything like that. Literally, someone goes more, and you have more, and someone goes less, and you have less. So you're saying that based on past performance, I can predict when someone's going to say more or less.
So you get into this having reread your updated chapter on greed recently. You get into this a bit where the sciences of sort of like psychology, and I would say including economics, they're not sciences, but we try to apply science to these things, but there's that falsification ability in science that you have to be able to prove something is false.
Correct.
You can't just throw stuff out there, but you can't really prove it's ever really wrong with a theorem.
Right.
It can be disproven. It's like, this happened, so it disproves a theory. That's
Correct.
science.
Right.
I feel like all economics has always been that way. And it's applying psychology. And why are people doing this stuff? And who knows why? But we hindsight explain it as if it's science.
Right.
And really, we're just constantly trying to keep up with what in the hell's happening.
Correct.
With Bitcoin now, I feel like with a fixed supply and the formula that is Bitcoin, for the first time, we have a money where we can actually maybe better apply scientific processes to the state of economies because the money is fixed.
Potentially.
Even though there's psychology involved, and you never know about markets, but the money, at least, is a flat line versus who would have known that?
Right. Well, I mean, when you talk about falsifiability, physics is a great one because they have. But if you look at the types of tests that they create in physics, I mean, we're talking about minute functions and things that very, very, very trimmed down to cause and effect relationships. This has to be the reason because of X, Y, Z, and you can falsify that Here's all the other reasons why it explains that isn't the effect for this atom behaving this way, right? When it comes to economics, they have to, as the nature of an economy, for instance, they have to make assumptions about billions of variables. We're going to assume all sorts of static ideas so we can apply math to this one problem. Well, what happens if you change any of those assumptions? Well, the math breaks down. So the theory breaks down. So everything breaks down. So you can't falsify it because any one of these conditions can be changed. They're all alterable, so there's no way to truly falsify it because it'll always work somewhere under, depending on what assumptions you make. You can always come up with a set of assumptions that will make the model work sometimes, most of the time, none of the time. So until you can iron out all the variables, until you can account for all variables, you can't really test things. That's a big problem with like diet studies, right? Like when they do like nutrition studies. The way to do a proper nutrition study would be to do a double-blind placebo study, right? We fed group A this diet that consisted precisely of these things, and they all had precisely these types of measurements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to iron out all their biology, their gender, their medical history. You have to be able to exclude all of that from the two groups, and then you have to feed the control group something random or, just unrestricted feeding or whatever it is, and then compare the outcomes, and then you have to account for more variables and more variables. And the problem with diet studies is to get a true controlled double-blind placebo-based study for diet, you'd have to lock 10,000 people in a room for 2 years and feed them very highly controlled diets, which is financially impossible.
You can't do the study without affecting their whole environment. And
well, not even that. You just can't pay for it. You'll never, ever be able to pay to house 10,000 people for 2 years and feed them a very strict diet and then monitor their activity levels and, take constant measurements of them and all that kind of. You just can't do it. So they rely on self-report data. They rely on, population data. But self-report data is wildly inaccurate. So you can't really draw any conclusions from any diet study ever because the ones that they can control for, 10 participants, college-age people, and how are you going to extrapolate anything from 10 people, college-aged people, and still not accounting for all the variables? So when you start talking economics and things like that, there are so many incalculable variables. But when you're talking about power law in particular, you're talking about predicting a measurement unit. Mm-hmm. We are measuring Bitcoin in US dollars, which is a variable yardstick. Mm-hmm. It changes daily. The ruler that you're predicting you're going to make a measurement with is changing. So there's no way to predict that. It's impossible to predict that because that's dictated by policy decisions. It's dictated by geopolitical decisions. If we decide to go into World War III, does power law hold up? Fuck no, because they're going to print so much goddamn money, that whole thing gets thrown out the window immediately. And that is a very readily falsifiable condition right there. You go, that's completely false because they can print as much money as they want anytime they want. They just did. Mm-hmm. They just dumped $6 trillion into the economy.
And there's outliers like that could occur for reasons that are just so unknowable or just for whatever excuse needed that, I think predicting the future is kind of impossible. So the Bitcoin power law.
Well, predicting future prices impossible.
And then prices in dollars. So you're using that measuring stick that contracts and expands.
Well, measure it in Zimbabwean dollars. Does power law hold up? Yeah. Well, that's different because it's the currency unit. Right. There's 165 possible measurements you could take with your power law.
Yeah.
You chose one out of 165, and you used a lot of patternicity to go, I think I see a pattern here. Mm-hmm. And then you backwards applied some mathematics to it. You backwards applied some shit. And then you backwards accounted for all the places where it didn't work. And then you're touting it as, I can predict with high accuracy that in 2033, Bitcoin will be $1 million.
Yeah, 2033, Bitcoin's $1 million.
Which is his prediction.
That's the prediction. And so my thought is not only currency itself that is being, framed around is wildly volatile and printed, but there are these outlier things that I just think as, say, whether it's corporations or nation states start to go in, or things could blow up in ways that are way beyond what we're kind of used to thinking about how this grows.
Correct.
And so it could be these exponential things that just, my God, it's not stopping now.
Right.
And so, now again, that's all kind of like, there's the human psychology aspect to it all, that it starts to go, and the model is different now. But I just see things like that breaking the model that we've been used to, where Bitcoin had a different role as a meme in our culture.
Right.
As it grew and was becoming known, and we think we know what it is, and I think we still don't really know what it is yet. When I talk to people around, people just, should I say 100% of people I ever talk to have no idea what Bitcoin is?
You could.
There was this.
I can falsify that statement.
Or they've heard of it, but it's always wrapped in
nonsense.
A Stockholm syndrome that I experience to this day. I get up in the morning, I go to work, and if I really stop and think about it, I'm not that it's a hard survivor situation. It's a Stockholm syndrome, though, that everything in my frame of mind of where the money I'm getting paid for to go to, and how and why I pay my taxes, and that the cage there is not even a cage. It's just the world.
Right.
And that's what everyone has.
Yeah.
And so I get myself stuck in that. And so if that real shift would occur, not even a Bitcoin standard, but just turning a corner,
right,
the models all break.
Right.
There is no model that we've ever seen anywhere. And even if we feel like, oh, it could follow this rainbow, that is a pittance to what a Bitcoin standard is.
Correct.
Or even starting a Bitcoin standard.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what blows my mind. And so it's like, oh, $1 million, 2033.
What does that even
I don't
mean?
even know what that even means.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because $1 million Bitcoin in 2033 could very well mean like, oh, I've got enough money to buy some bread this week. Like that's...
Yeah, $1 million. What does that $1 million mean?
Yeah, what does it buy? But, I don't know, the power law guy I was not too impressed with. I mean, the thing is... the reason I asked about what he was like in person, because I get this sense that he is like genuinely believing what he's talking about. Like,
sure.
I don't think he is like hyperbolically or sort of manipulatively approaching this in a way like, oh, I can get a little traction, I can get some social media presence. I think like he genuinely thinks, I've got it. I've figured out this thing. No one else has figured out in the history of mankind. Power law is the thing that governs price. And the thing is, if he were measuring like growth of the Bitcoin network, like growth, like adoption of Bitcoin holders, and then apply power law to it, I might go, oh, okay, there's some possibility there.
I'll have to
because they use power law to check things like network growth.
Yes.
But he's using USD as a proxy for network growth, and I go, you can't use a faulty measuring stick to predict a growth curve.
Yeah.
Because this is based on biological processes, neuroscientific processes, like neurons growing and neural networks growing, things like that. Populations, but even there was a huge article in Nature that said scale-free, like things being scale-free, which is one of the tenets of power law theories and things like that. These researchers published in Nature, they said, look, man, we applied the scale-free criteria to 100 of the most common things that people use for power law projections, and they said they don't fit if we actually use some strict criteria on it. Said if you bend the rules a bunch, you can get them all to fit. But if you really apply strict criteria, there's like 2 out of the 100 that actually adhere to this scale freeness. And what in reality it is you could just map it log and it works the same.
Right.
And but of course, the people that are big power law proponents, I mean, so these guys end up having their math battles and talking about whether or not the math is right or not, and whether or not they've made the right assumptions or not, yada yada yada. But they're arguing at the margins about a very fringe idea in mathematics and statistics that's sort of way in the fuck over here and nobody gives a shit about. Mm-hmm. Like no normal human being gives a flying fuck about whether or not your scale fitment is correct. And or the way you got your scale to fit. It's like it's a esoteric academic topic that appeals to 50 people. Until you attach Bitcoin price to it, you are relegated to a field of 50 people might read it, 2 people might comment on it, nobody's going to understand it outside of that.
It feeds a natural interest in wanting to know and see Bitcoin grow and feel like, well, price is up, going up. So it feeds that for me. I also like the fact that people are putting effort and interest into modeling attempts to better understand Bitcoin. But in my head, where Bitcoin's potential and where it's going is so beyond any models that we're going to learn how Bitcoin affects the world in new ways that we don't even know, which I can imagine, but then you sound crazy. And so,
well, that's it. I mean, you end up in science fiction, right? Like, you're just sort of like...
I'll have to send you this article I read about it and it's lengthy, but there were graphs in there that separated out, okay, it's not about the US dollar, but here it is about non-zero wallets, number of non-zero wallets, and hash rate, and how Bitcoin itself has grown to try to look at Bitcoin's growth and potential devoid of some fiat price, So,
well, here's a corollary to that is you say, how much does it take to create a non-zero wallet? How many entities have multiple non-zero wallets? We don't know. Okay, well, so you have to make an assumption based on that. Hash rate, I mean, that, whether that's following power law or not, doesn't necessarily reflect growth in the network either. Again, using USD as a proxy, which is the cornerstone of this guy's thing, because when I said, well, what happens if you price in Turkish lira or Argentinian fucking pesos or whatever, he dismissed it. He never addressed it. He just said, just because it doesn't work in that currency, it's invalid. Yeah, because if it's a power law, and we're using currency as your measuring stick, then if it doesn't work for all currencies, then it's not a fucking power law.
Yeah.
Like, there is no thing that says BTC must, by default, be priced in U.S. dollars.
Yeah, it kind of presumes things about the U.S. dollar being, like, basically the world reserve currency, which is largely accurate, but is changing.
Well, even if it's not the world reserve currency, it's assuming much, and not, like, you can find a pattern in that, but it's patternicity. It's the same thing as seeing a face in a fucking cloud. And you can backwards apply math to the face in the cloud and go, well, this is why these atmospheric conditions created that face, and that's why my theory about ghosts in the clouds holds true, because of the jet stream flow theory. And you just go, oh, dude, whatever. You know what happened is you thought you saw a face, but there's no objective way to say whether or not it's a face, right?
Well, in the future, the model will say we're going to see more faces. And so you're going to see more faces.
Right.
I can guarantee you.
And if you don't see more faces, then either I'm going to change the model in the future to explain why it didn't work this time, or I'll just disappear into the ether. And, the problem with guys like that, and the thing that bothers me about it, isn't so much that whether or not he believes it, whether or not it puts a lot of people, like, there's a guy, God, what's his name? Larson something.
Lars Larson?
Yeah, not Lars Larson. He's some Swedish guy. He's a shitcoiner. And he's got some, like, proprietary trading system. He's actually a pretty reasonable guy aside from his shitcoinery. But he said, he posted a thing, what caused the biggest losses for you in the 2021 crash? And, he said, I'm going to read however many comments I get, 2,000 comments. And he's got a huge following on YouTube. He's got a decent following on Twitter as well. And he said he read all of the comments, and he said, by far, the most common thing that said, I got wrecked because of this one thing. It was Plan B, and his Bitcoin's going to be $1 million on X date.
Oh, brother.
I mean, so many people got wrecked by that. I mean, just absolutely fucking destroyed. Top buying fucking goblins. And these are all short-term thinkers, right? These are not people that are investing in Bitcoin because they think number go up forever, and they believe in the movement, and they believe in the philosophy and the religion of Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. And they're, like, vying for a brighter future for humanity. These are people that are just short-term gamblers. That doesn't mean they deserve to get fucking wrecked because some fucking asshole came along and made some stupid fucking scale model thing that he said this is going to, price goes up forever, you're going to get this. It's a guarantee. The math says so.
Right.
And it's a bunch of, shitcoinery.
Well, and even as I trust the Bitcoin power laws, authentic intentions and interest in trying to model, I don't believe it's, it's not a scam. It's just it's hard work trying to do modeling and explore the ideas around predictive stuff. What it does, though, for most people is it, like the best I could do as a pleb would be keep up with the idea, but I can hang my hat on, by such and such a date it could be this price or that price range.
Right.
And so then when you kind of have, you start to hang your hope on that hook, with a model, and what happens is that you're kind of thinking or sharing this model idea,
right.
And when the model breaks, it creates FUD. Unless it's crazy, the upside, but still, when things go outside of the model or it's unexpected or it's not in your favor,
right.
You get wound up in all this extra FUD about what you thought.
Right.
And at a more fundamental level than it should, it affects your resolve.
Yeah.
So like you had this resolve kind of invested in a model, and when your model breaks, you reel back and have to reevaluate why you're in, when really it shouldn't have been a question, because you already knew, but you got caught up in sort of like hopes and dreams of a model.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%, dude. It's the thing is, if it gets people attracted to Bitcoin, gets people interested in the Bitcoin network, awesome. I think it gets people in for the wrong reasons, with the wrong expectations, and it attracts the get-rich-quick baboons, you know. And it attracts short-term thinking, it attracts short-term speculation, it attracts, and not, I mean, Bitcoin is for everyone. I don't, you know, however you choose to use Bitcoin is not my problem, right? Like, you choose to fucking swing trade it, you choose to trade it for, you know, Thorchain or some bullshit. I don't know. I mean, you do you. But it also feeds into that narrative of, like, this is a gambling token, and, you know, because any credible person looks at any price prediction model and just says, fuck you, you're full of shit. Like, just reflexively, you have to go, I predict price will be this on this day. Go fuck off. Like, that should be your default position at all times, every time someone makes a price prediction. Because they're 100% wrong 100% of the time.
That's what spurned me, or it got me. So, like that Balaji guy, smart guy, says interesting stuff, and I think part of it is for making a headline or a little stir. Samson Mao, really respect the guy. Aqua Wallet, outreach in getting Bitcoin into other countries.
Right.
But when these guys say Bitcoin will be $1 million next month or Bitcoin will be $1 million this year, it's not that I disagree. I have no belief about it.
Right.
But when you say that, it sets up hopes in people for bad decisions and wrong motivations. It's the fiat thing. Models priced in dollars, they hook people into fiat thinking. You're thinking dollars, and your dollars, and your dollars, and so like, what are you? You're going to cash out at a certain price? Is that the thing? Is that what we're doing here? It hits a certain price, and then after that, it should go down. Cash out.
Right. No.
What are you doing?
That's not right. Yeah. You're doing it wrong already. Well, I mean, when Samson Mao says something like that, like, there's a lot of hyperbole in there, and there's a lot of, like, yay team. Like,
sure,
we're gonna rout them, right? You go, how you can't predict that the football team's gonna rout them, and it's like, I know, everybody knows that, right? Theoretically, I mean, yeah, maybe some goomba somewhere is looking at it going, oh, Samson Mao said $1 million. I'm going to buy it because Samson Mao is the only source of truth in the world, and I worship at the altar of Samson Mao. There's probably some human being that exists in that sphere.
Or you're wanting and needing to hear that, and somebody said it, so you're going with it.
Right. But, I mean, if you're going to go with it, you still have to have some default thing that says, this person is worth listening to enough that I'm going to devote all my life savings to that idea. If someone is coming at you and saying, this is a mathematical certainty, it's science, this is going to happen, it has to happen because the model says so, and then you make a decision on it, it's, like Samson Mao saying that, like, Bitcoin's going to be $1 million by December 25th. We're going to get a Santa candle
Christmas
that's going to take us to $1 million. I made my prediction. That's the tin money, whatever stock power model, power stock model.
Yeah, the tin money power model.
This is the tin money Santa Claus model. It says that I guarantee 100%, no doubt in my mind, Bitcoin is going to be $1 million on December 25th.
There's no reason it shouldn't be. Not financial advice,
right? But
it will be.
And it has to be, because I said so. I mean, the thing is anybody hearing that should obviously know, okay, this guy has no fucking idea what the price is going to be. And yet I can say it's going to be $1 million someday probably, right? That's less interesting. But if you just come out and go, it's going to be $1 million. It's a way to drive engagement. It's a way to drive discussion. It's a way to drive people to talk about things. again, if I come out and say, look, I've done 10 years of research on price prediction models, and I can predict with absolute certainty that yada, 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 price is going to be $1 million in 2027. Well, now you're misleading people. Like, you're not just making hyperbolic statements. You're not, yay team, we're going to win. You're not just kind of making a fun statement that goes, I think it's going to be $1 million next
Trust
week.
the science.
Yeah, you're literally saying trust the science. And the science is wrong. I mean, it's false. It's not, there's no part of that model that has any validity whatsoever. So I think it's just different. I think it's irresponsible, ultimately, but
yeah,
kind of. But again, or you could take the view of like, hey, it's an interesting topic.
I just take it as an interesting idea, knowing that I inherently don't trust models or experts, or part of that is my lack of time to really do the proof of work to understand it. Part of it also is I'm irreverent to
fiat pricing,
soothsayers, I guess.
Oh, right.
I mean, well, and the price itself, fiat. I mean, who knows? I can imagine some scenarios where, Bitcoin could very well be $1 million, way sooner than we expect, for a domino series of reasons. Right. I mean, I could imagine that.
Well, here, I can imagine a scenario for you right now. We fuck up in Ukraine like we keep doing, and then it turns into an all-out shooting war between Europe, Russia, United States, China. Then we print so much fiat that we're drowning in the stuff. Bitcoin shoots to $1 million by the end of next year, and then the entire system collapses and it drops to $5. Did power law work? No. Well, why not? Well, because of, extrinsic circumstances.
Yeah.
Well, then you didn't really have. But are all those things variables that could very easily happen? Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's no, because there's no constraint on black swans. There's no constraint on. So you have to make an assumption that the economy is going to continue going the way it's been going for the last 15 years. And even that alone, you say, that's a pretty fucking stupid way to start things, because you start your measurement right after the greatest financial catastrophe ever in the history of the fucking modern economy. The global financial system is about to collapse. We need to inject trillions of dollars of stimulus globally, or we're all going to fucking die. Mm-hmm. That's your starting point for, see, power law works. And it's like, dude, you can't fucking start there. But I get that's also just happens to coincide with the birth of Bitcoin, or I don't think it happens to coincide. I think that was the genesis for Bitcoin being born.
Yeah.
But if you start there and then you trace forward to 2020, where they took that experiment and put it on steroids and cranked it to 11, and hey, well, since it worked last time, let's just throw a fucking bucket of money at this. We'll just throw $6 trillion this time. And then say, well, so look, my law model still works. It's like, no, it doesn't, dude. You're
Well, and so say Bitcoin's fiat number went way up, but in fiat, what does that also mean? And it may be that, the price doesn't tank, but it's like when Germany's selling this Bitcoin, and there was a funny tweet, it might have been Marty Bent who posted something like, how hilarious it is that Germany is selling Bitcoin in fiat, that it can print itself anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
You can print this fiat. What are you exchanging a certain hard commodity for? Not that they're not required to or whatever, but you're avoiding Bitcoin when you can just print this fiat anyway. So basically, they're just trying to get rid of a dirty book.
Yeah.
And why?
Well, that's the problem that the fiat fucking goons are running into right now. Is people are starting more universally to wake up to the idea. And you start hearing this kind of stuff. I know it's probably in our Bitcoin echo chamber, because we are 100% in a fucking echo chamber, right?
Sure.
And yet you can start to see people trickling in from the outside saying, the president of El Salvador says, hey, why are you paying taxes? If they can just fucking print money, what do you need to pay taxes?
You pay taxes, and they can print the money they want to spend that they're going to print anyway, and they're going to spend anyway.
Yeah. Well, Lawrence Leopard just posted a chart. I think he reposted a chart. Shows this is the amount of taxes coming in. This is the fucking amount of money they're spending.
All of our taxes, a majority of our taxes, goes largely to paying off just the interest on this debt they've been.
Our interest, our invented interest out of our invented money, is now eclipsing the amount that we spend on defense, and we spend more on defense than all other countries combined. So if you think about all of this, just from a logical standpoint, if you step back, the magician has turned his back. He showed you how the trick is working, and people are just starting to go, wait a minute. You didn't really hide the coin. Like, the coin didn't really disappear. You just had it in the back of your hand. Hey, wait a minute. Like, this is all magician bullshit. Uh-huh. And they're still trying to act like, watch the show. But everyone knows how the trick works now, or anybody bothering to look. Our echo chamber is particularly well-suited to look and go, that's all bullshit. It's just there are still people in the audience that are still watching the show going, oh my God, he just pulled a coin out of that girl's ear. Huh. But
it's becoming a much more knowable situation, a knowable problem, and a knowable solution.
Well, they're getting so clumsy about it. Like, the coin is getting so big in the magician's hand, like, they just can't hide it anymore, you know. They can't do the little woo-hoo-hoo, and because the coin is bigger than the distraction. So,
yeah.
Eventually this shit falls apart, and, I mean, I honestly believe right now the race is between catastrophe and getting big people on board with Bitcoin. And, like, when I say people, I don't mean, like, your Joe average pleb. I mean, like, institutional adoption.
And it's happening.
It's certainly happening. You know, but I think barring that, dude, like, it's not going to be pretty, man. Like, so
yeah, the transition to more of the Bitcoin standard, if you call it that, it's going to be clunky and scary.
Potentially. I mean, that's my point, though. Is like if it becomes a clunky, scary transition, then things are going to get ugly.
And that's presuming that basically, economic stuff really just fails and continues to fail.
Just fucking knives.
Which I don't know how we avoid that. But.
Well, that's why I hold out hope. I mean, my source of hope, my source of bullishness for the future is that we don't have to collapse because of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't have to go through that rugged transition period.
Yeah.
We can go through a period where it gradually realigns everything, right? Like, and I'm going to cling to this desperately because I think it's such a superior outcome to the alternative. And the alternative is, you know, the ANCAP, everyone's preparing for nuclear war and building bunkers and all this fucking stupid shit. Because that's when lots and lots and lots and lots of people get hurt and die, right? And our quality of life plummets, and things just suck for years and years and years. And it takes a long time to rebuild it. I mean, there's literally nothing stopping us from returning to the Dark Ages tomorrow. And people like to think that they know a lot more about the world and everybody understands things better. And I go, no, they don't. Like, there was an interesting experiment. They took a bunch of Android tablets down to some little African village. And these kids didn't have internet access. They didn't have anything. They'd never seen a fucking computer. Don't know anything about anything. They dropped off these tablets and just said, and they gave them some sort of satellite internet access and said, all right, figure them out. No instruction booklet, no, just like tablet not turned on. Here you go, figure it out. Within a week, these kids had hacked Android, installed a bunch of different programs. Kids that knew nothing 7 days prior had figured out a lot of technological things at a higher level than most boomers in America today. And so if you think of them as some sort of backwards people that didn't understand anything, can barely read, yada, 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 somehow or another they managed to get to our technical sophistication within a week. So we're not walking around in possession of some sort of specialized knowledge. Ask anybody to explain Schrodinger's cat. And they'll go, well, it's about an observation of a cat. Like, if a cat's not there, like, you know, but they're never going to have any coherent explanation.
The quantum mechanics of it all.
Right. There's another experiment where they said, hey, explain how a helicopter works. They'll ask someone, do you know how a helicopter works? Yes. Okay, explain it. So, like, the blades do a thing, and then, like, no fucking idea. They have no credible ability to break down the actual functioning of a helicopter. Like, explain the forces involved, explain what the rotors are doing, explain, like, the pitch of the rotors and what the tail rotor does and how it provides counter-rotation force and how the controls work. I mean, none of it. They just can't do it. But there's another experiment on the same lines where they said, hey, draw a bicycle. Do you think you could draw a bicycle from memory? Yeah. And then when they draw it, it's like you got fucking shit. Like, I mean, it's just like this.
You see the frame all the time, but when you draw the frame, you're like, oh, wait, does it go?
Yeah. And all of a sudden, like, all the angles and everything is all broken to shit.
Sure.
So there's this, like, assumption, like, what my point of all this is, like, everybody around us right now is operating under this illusion of, like, I have superior advanced knowledge to a previous people. And they don't. They are in possession of no more net knowledge, a small, tiny handful of people on the planet have advanced knowledge in very highly specialized silos of knowledge. Collectively, they have put things together that operate in a very fragile state, and those are maintained by people that have very tiny silos, and that's the the division of labor kind of thing. But outside of those people and outside of their domains, they still don't know any more than anybody else ever in the history of mankind.
Certainly. That brings me to a thought about just the nature of our human psyche, our egos, our presumption of, and it's mentioned in your chapter, is, I guess if you call it consciousness or free will. Mm-hmm. So before I get into that, when you mentioned the African village and the technology, there's a book by Neil Stephenson, The Diamond Age. I started Neil Stephenson back in college. I read Snow Crash, which I thought at the time was like awesome. And I disagree with some of the presumptions about mind viruses and all that stuff, but it's interesting ideas. And then he wrote Cryptonomicon and Diamond Age. In Diamond Age, there was this thing going on where, societal weird breakdown challenges, but that kids were basically in lieu of having structured schooling or even families and stuff like that, but like foster houses handling kids. They were just given like these smart tablets that just the kids went to town on. Wow. And the kids on their own with technology had access to all the information in the world, and just leaps and bounds were better than any potential construct that was created to educate people.
Right. Yeah.
And because this innate human potential is there, there's this hunger. The human brain is looking for not just to be preoccupied, but entertainment, learning, growth. That's like it's baked in.
Yeah.
I think most people, raising little kids, people have hard backgrounds, but man, that human brain doesn't stop. It's like learning, growing, achieving, creating.
Yeah.
So there's that. On the free will concept, I think we've mentioned this before, but like people want to learn a little about something and then kind of go with that and feel like, oh, I understand that. I get it. I learned just enough to say I know like a lot about it. And it's hard to say, wow, the more I learn, the more I realize that my circumference of what I don't know is more than several. Significant. I know less and less the more I learn. Right. I don't dream often, but last night I had a dream. It made me think of it this morning, where when you have those dreams where for me, as rarely as I ever remember dreams, every once in a while when I do, they're so vivid and strong that I have to wake up and sort out, like, was this real? Or did that happen? Or where am I at right now?
Yeah.
And because they're real enough and they relate to like stresses at work or in my life, that my brain, as I sleep, so basically when we are sleeping, our brain goes through every night these mechanisms of preparing us for tomorrow's survival, right, or clipping and putting away the trauma, or whatever it is. At least me as a guy, I can wake up in the morning with kind of a fresh slate and I'm just ready for another day. Yeah. Because my brain detoxed itself overnight, clipping away the bad stuff, prepping me for potential future hard stuff, and giving me an outlook where I can begin again and be ready. Yeah. And then what I realized was that process, I think it was Scott Adams, he'd gone into free will at one point, because he'll get into stuff about like the simulation, right, this being a simulation. Okay, whatever about it, it doesn't help to hang my hat on that. Similarly, free will, I don't think it helps to have to know some truth about the nature of free will, because it can kind of short circuit your present process of experiencing that. Okay. So my thought about it all was that dreams, prepping our minds, going into a day, where somewhere in there, subconsciously, my brain has been prepped for potential things, good or bad, in the world, so that when they come up, I feel like I'm consciously making decisions and thinking about it to respond to it, because that's me. Whereas a whole huge amount of our brain space, it's subconscious stuff that bubbles up that our brain, after we've acted and reacted, made decisions about or whatever, we rationalize that that's me, right, with free will making decisions because I know, right, like I know what I'm doing, right, versus I don't know what's going on, but I think I do.
Yeah.
It's simply happening, and the little punchline I put on it, and this sounds dark or whatever, but the concept of free will, we feel this consciousness, this free will, we presume it's real, whatever. It's basically, if we're like a mechanical meat structure that's like operating without free will in the sense that we think it's happening, it's because consciousness is the experience that a biological machine has when it's running. So when a biological mechanical meat machine that's running as we are, consciousness is basically the experience that machine has when it's running.
Theoretically, sure.
That's just that's an idea.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a helpful idea to like navel gaze around and think, yeah, we don't have free will, or this is a simulation. I don't think those ideas are helpful. But at times when I look at it, I'm like, that could be what's going on.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think there's much merit. I think I even said in that chapter, like, hey, there's not just, and Robert Sapolsky, it was more like me agreeing with Dr. Sapolsky, saying, I have no problem with the idea that people just don't really have free will. And I don't know what the world looks like then. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, all of these structures just stop sort of working in the absence of free will. And so we could sit around and talk about it, but then you end up in that mathematic decision, or the mathematic argument debate. Like, it's this fringe thing that nobody really gives a shit, because this is just kind of the way, the objective reality is we're all operating under the assumption that people have some sort of exercise or authority over their actions and whatnot. And yet, the reason I bring it up in the book is because I want to start stripping people from this idea of, like, being in possession of superior knowledge, or being in possession of some sort of grand unified theory about how the world works and why. And because it's meant as an exercise in humility, and it's meant as an exercise of people just stepping back a little bit. Because the amount of certitude that people will express things with, I think, is alarming oftentimes. Because I've watched people at all sort of ranges of understanding of the world express all kinds of certitudes about all sorts of things, myself included. I mean, it's not a condemnation on anybody, it's just something we do, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's just an attempt to break people free from that idea, because they will say things like, Bitcoin's going to be $1 million, or Bitcoin's going to change the world, or Bitcoin's going to do this, or, this thing is going to happen, or this has to happen, or this has to go this way, or we do this because of these reasons. And it all traces back to economics and all this kind of stuff. And like a great example I'm putting in the introduction is like wampum, right? Mm-hmm. Have you read Broken Money, Lynn Alden's book?
No, I have not yet.
I recommend it. I mean, it's an amazing book. She is an incredible thinker and an incredible presenter of ideas and things like that. And in that book, she talks about stock to flow. And the stock to flow model, at least in terms of broad economic theory and currencies and whatnot, is the currency with the superior stock to flow, meaning how hard is it to produce the thing and how much of it can flow into the economy, basically, is going to supplant other currencies. And she makes the assertion in the book, I think in like chapter 2 or 3, pretty early on, wampum got replaced as currency because gold had superior stock to flow characteristics. And the second I hear that, I go, that is false. That is absolutely 100% incorrect. Not even close to the realm of possibility. And yet, people will parrot that. People will say it with authority. Economists, people I respect, deeply admire, Safadine, all those people, will say things like that. Gold replaced wampum because wampum was too easy to make. So the Europeans, with their manufacturing technologies, could come in and mass-produce wampum, and that's why wampum lost value and then was eventually supplanted by gold. There is an 1888 paper, or 1886 paper or something like that talks about wampum. And these were scientists of the time that said wampum is clearly a currency. It is the currency of the natives, and they use it just like gold. There's a 1955 paper that said wampum is not a currency. The entire concept of money is foreign to the natives. To equate those two is an error of monumental proportions. This is not correct. They have never used wampum as currency the way Europeans use currency or as money the way Europeans use money. They don't even have a concept for it. It would be like saying you are doing some process that you, like attributing characteristics to something you're doing when you've never even heard of it. Just going, oh, he's clearly operating as an economic actor because of XYZ. Wampum got replaced as a currency because the European Christians dominated that culture and forced it upon people. Period. There was no, like, this was superior currency.
Like, we won't take wampum anymore, sort of thing.
Well, it's just, it didn't have any value to the Europeans other than to extort things from the Indians.
Yeah, initially, yeah.
I mean, it's just a convenient way to get stuff. You go, hey, we can just make this for free. Fuck yeah, let's do that, because they're going to give us things we need, like tobacco and beaver pelts and whatever the fuck it is that the Indians were trading for. For them, it was purely a cultural thing. It was never a unit of account. It was never a monetary unit. It was never a durable good to exchange value and da-da-da-da-da. It may have occurred like that sometimes in some situations, but, like Lynn Alden even says, oh, they used it as displays of wealth. No, they didn't. It was a cultural exchange item. It was not a currency item. It was not a monetary unit in the way that Europeans think about it, European Christians specifically back in the day, because that became the dominant sort of financial ideology around the world, right? So when I say European Christians, I mean the Western economy writ large. But right there, that's a fundamental error that people assume is true. People will say and write in books, this is true, this is the way this happened. And my purpose on talking about things like free will is like we need to step back from this certitude around things like that. We need to stop thinking that we have this sort of like, we have understood now where money comes from. Because we haven't. It's not settled science. It's not it's not gravity. Right? It's not something where they go, well, we have a really, really high degree of certainty that this is where gravity comes from and why. Or this is how gravity works and why. To say that about money is an error, right? And so if you can challenge at base levels things like, we haven't even really settled yet if you have free will. If you're actually making a choice or not. That's the thing I'm trying to get people away from.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying too. I think that the human psyche needs to just presume and know that we have free will, because it drives everything about our purpose and belief systems,
right? Regardless
of whether it's true.
Correct.
It just works,
and it's a heuristic, right? I mean, it's a shortcut to knowledge. It's a functional, useful shortcut for us. But if we're going to talk about things at a more concrete level, at a more scientific level, if we're going to talk about the way economies develop, if we're going to talk about the way markets develop, if we're going to talk about any of this kind of stuff, we cannot approach it from, this is, because it's all starting assumptions, right? And if you get your assumptions wrong, then everything else is fucking broken. And so, like, if you start with the assumption of even something as simple as wampum is currency, well, that's an assumption. It's incorrect. So you've now modeled things on that assumption that are all going to be fundamentally incorrect. They have to be incorrect because your starting assumption was incorrect. So to design some sort of economic theory around an idea, even that trivial, and that's only just one tiny little slice of all economic theory out there, it calls into question everything that everybody is saying, thinking about things. And that's sort of why I bring up, not sort of, it is 100% why I bring up the issues around free will and things like that. Because if you can start challenging, like, just the way people come to those conclusions is not necessarily under their control. And the following chapters that I'm going to be writing about now are things like luck. And when you talk about market economies and things like that, like, there is this presumption that these people have ascended to areas, positions of power and things like that because of something they did. And there's a combination of factors at play. There's the things they did, and then there's the things that they had no control over and they got lucky on. And that involves another enormous bias in human beings, which is survivorship bias. Right? Mm-hmm. People, they look at a success and they go, oh, they achieve this, they assign a causal relationship to that success that negates or disregards or leaves out entire swaths of things that didn't go wrong. And you can see it in astronaut selection, you can see it in what becomes a hit song, you can see it in what becomes a hit movie, what becomes a hit book, what becomes a popular Twitter person. They will all attribute to, I did XYZ, that's why I am in the position I am in. And it leaves out this huge chunk of information that
A lot of people doing that stuff who also didn't become hits.
Correct. Right. The overwhelming majority.
Mm-hmm.
So if you assign some sort of magical capabilities to these people and say, oh, well, you're a leader now because you did all these amazing things, and that's why we should trust your judgment. But you strip away all the times like, well, I mean, if you just said, Donald Trump just got lucky, like, just flat out got fucking lucky. Should you listen to the guy who just lucked his way into things? Like, you wouldn't listen to a lottery winner. You wouldn't go, hey, this guy's got some shit to tell me about life and how I should exist. Because you know for a fact the only reason they're in that position of power is because of just gross, stupid, infinitesimally small luck. Just was graced upon them. They won $1 billion in the super mega world lotto, whatever. And now they have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That gives them no more authority or weight or anything to their opinions. You would look at that person with a high degree of suspicion for a reason, right? Because you just know for a fact it's luck. If you look at the history of Tesla, there was a period in time when that company was nearly bankrupt, and he just got lucky getting the financing just in time, and it's pure luck. It was literally the decision of one person that goes, I think I'll take a flyer on it. Mm-hmm. Had that gone the other way, had that guy woken up and eaten a different bowl of Cheerios and, had sour milk instead of fresh milk, and his wife didn't give him a blowjob or did give him a blowjob or whatever it is that morning.
That might have been it.
That could have been it. He could have called him 5 minutes earlier and right after the guy had an argument with his mistress, or he could have called him 5 minutes later. I mean, there's thousands of variables that went into that decision that may or may not have been implicated by free will, thoughtful choice, risk-taking behavior, statistical anomalies, any number of things that made Tesla today, rather than Elon Musk is some fucking bankrupt guy. Like, he could have just as easily been the guy who squandered all his PayPal money to fund some fucking retard car company that didn't work. And
there's a quote, thinking about luck, that I might have mentioned this before, but what was it? Was it Marcus Aurelius, or it was a Roman general of some kind, I think, where basically luck is where opportunity meets, I want to say proof of work, but anyway. Preparation, yeah. So, yes, there's luck, and yet without that fertile ground of preparation and work, luck doesn't gain traction. So you've got to have that anyway, but then again, you can have the story where it's like, how'd you get so rich over, these years? It's like, well, I bought a wholesale apple and polished it up and took it to a retail place and sold it for twice that. Right. And then I bought 2 more apples, polished them up, took them to the retail, sold them for twice that. And then I just rinsed and repeat. Really? Oh, well, yeah, and then also my rich uncle died and I got $1 million.
Right.
Oh, that happened too.
Yeah.
Now, both work. One worked with a bit of luck.
Yeah.
And you see those where it's like, so what's your story? How did you make your first $1 million? Well, I took a dirty apple, polished it up, sold it retail, and then I did that a whole lot. And it took a lot of hard work and grind and stuff.
Right.
Wow.
All true. And all true.
I do that too, though.
Yeah.
And I'm still hustling.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, and also I got a lot of great funding.
Right.
Okay, well, that helps.
Or there was a flood in all the apple orchards, and I just happened to have an exclusive contract with this one apple orchard that didn't get flooded, so I had the only apples on the market that year. Like the Forrest Gump thing, right? They just happened to go out on their boat, and then he was the king of fucking shrimping.
So it takes both. You can't just have luck. You can't just not prepare.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's not to discount the work that people put in. Like, and that's one of the points in that book, Success and Luck. The guy, I mean, it's a brilliant piece of work. I think everybody should read it. But it's one of those things where that guy, he talks about things like that. Like, yeah, of course, it takes work to be an astronaut candidate, right? But there are something like 10,000 well-qualified astronaut candidates, and there are 10 positions available. So clearly, all 10,000 aren't going to get there. And his trick is, he says, look, if you ask someone, what did you do to get here? They will tell you, oh, I worked hard, I got A++, and I did this, and I did volunteer work, and I blah, 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 blah. They'll come up with all their things that they know they did that they wrongfully attribute to their success. Or partially correctly. Like, they put in that effort, they did that proof of work, and they were in a position to benefit from that luck. But he said, if you want to change their narrative, just ask the same person, were there any lucky breaks on the way? And then all of a sudden you'll immediately hear Oh my God, yeah. Well, right when I was getting started, I was taking a dump, and I went to pull up my pants, and I fell over, and I hit my head on the fucking door, and I was bleeding. And then this guy that came in happened to be a doctor, and he was sitting there, and my dick was out, and I was covered in poo. But this guy was really nice, and then
this is an astronaut.
We started talking, and this piece of paper fell out of my thing, and he said, "Oh, are you a candidate?" Yeah. Oh, I'm friends with so and so. Yeah. If it hadn't been for that time when I fell over after taking a dump, I never would have had the opportunity to do X, Y, Z. You go, oh, so were you successful? Because oh my God, yeah, I got lucky so many times. There's so many times where this could have gone sideways. One of the most honest and one of the only reasons I have any respect for Jeff Bezos is he was sitting in an interview and they said, "So what was the key to your success?" And he said, "I just got lucky. I just won a great big fat fucking lottery ticket. Period." He did not extol his virtues and all his brilliance and all his, I have figured out the customer wants this and da-da-da. He said, "I just got lucky." Period.
Even as he was working crazy hard and had a vision and was hustling, and when markets shifted and there was this need and whatever, he was right there and could kind of capitalize on that.
Well, my point is Jeff Bezos does not extol the virtues of his proof of work. He personally, the guy who is sitting on top of that pile, sitting on top of that mountain, solely attributes it to luck. So I just got lucky. And I look at that and I go, well, that's a very honest answer. Because if you look at all the places where Amazon could have gone the other way, there are thousands of them. Thousands. Regardless of how much input he put into it. There were, at the time...
There were so many online markets. I mean...
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that era. The .com stuff, this market and this Mercado and everything.
Yeah, my sister worked for an auction company, an online auction company that was competing with eBay. And they were closing in on the market share. And it was a legit operation. These were very thoughtful, super hardworking people. They were building out this company. And they lost. That's it. There was no secret sauce. There was no magic thing. It's just eBay got bigger quicker, and they hopped on with PayPal bigger quicker, and they didn't get shut down because of all the scandals and shit that was going on with eBay early on. And so yes, those people put in work, and yes, so did thousands of others. Online booksellers, how many online booksellers were there in the world? Oh my God, dude! When Amazon came on, there's 50,000 fucking people coming up with the same idea. 50,000 people coming up with this online marketplace or this online idea or this. And it's not that the cream floated to the top. It's just the ones that managed to chain together enough luck and things like that. Also putting in the same amount of work. Also were able to capitalize and also got lucky when they were capitalizing and also got So it's a mix of things. But
I do remember an interview. I think it was with Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman, big, they're bros, Bezos and Friedman. And I do remember Jeff Bezos always having these hard meetings with developers and program managers looking at the UI and just saying, can we make this 3-step process a one-button click process? Right. And he was always just hammering on, make it easier, make it simpler, make it, and at some levels like efficiency and navigating through processes of which customers will back out. Right. But also, maybe unknowingly at times, customers were like, I like that. One click, boop. Right. Or, oh, it remembers that thing for me. Yeah. All kinds of little things. So he was constantly hammering on what worked and what users liked.
There's that model. And then there was a company called Without a Box, which was an Amazon company that used to do film festival submissions. It was the largest. It had massive market dominance. Amazon used not efficiency, but lawsuits to maintain that market dominance. And they sat on top of that heap for a long time, and they kept squandering and not doing those customer service things. They just went, hey, this is a cash cow, let's just keep running. And so, yes, Jeff Bezos did those sort of things on his little flagship operation, but he had another thing he was making a couple $100 million a year that he just ignored, allowed his executives to ignore, and then it got collapsed by 2 kids in a fucking basement in Canada because they put up a superior website, which is now the dominant, film festival submission website. So, yes, and is always my thing. Yes, yeah. And they've blown shit up. They've done stuff wrong. They've rolled out things that didn't work. They've had customer, meltdowns.
Sure.
And the work culture at Amazon is sort of nightmarish, depending on who you ask. And I mean, there's all sorts of issues around it. You look at their labor relations and XYZ and yada yada yada. It's not these people are not. They're fumbling through things just as much as anybody else. And of course, if you are talking to investors, you don't want to come up and say, "Well, we're kind of bungling around. We fucked up a bunch of stuff, and if it were me, I wouldn't invest in this company at all. But we seem to be getting away with it, so give us some money." Like, that's not a great narrative. We are the most innovative company ever in the history of the world, and we do this and we do this. And I'm relentlessly focused on blah 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 blah. Like, that's the sales pitch, right? Mm-hmm. Like, nobody's going to be honest in their advertising. So
years ago, I worked at Microsoft for a number of years, and worked in computer science, programming, and testing, quality assurance. And I entered that marketplace when I was 19,
right,
young, willing to burn the candle at both ends, and I was more free and clear personally. Worked my butt off, and I entered that with visions about Microsoft, criticisms in my head, being a hacker, and knowing, even in the mid '90s, there's legitimate concerns about Microsoft, but you get captured in what you would see, the vision, the promotions, your team. There's these brilliant people that you're working with, and they're all working hard, and you're feeling that, like, this is how stuff gets built, how we make it work, right, and this is how we stay competitive. And you see Steve Ballmer marching around and leading the troops, and it was like there's this energy, and you could feel that. So the culture was like, it felt so good. And then also, you want to get into the dark nitty gritty of like to stay competitive and get where Microsoft did, even in the the late '80s or early on, right, ruthless, dirty, evil stuff,
nasty shit.
Like, here's a good competitor. We're going to make them an offer and either
disband them,
either just get rid of them. We'll either incorporate them and merge them and incorporate them and then fleece what we need to.
Okay.
Or they don't take the offer, we're going to shut them out of our market.
Right.
Or we'll just simply, if we can, we'll just buy them out and bury it.
Yeah.
That happened again and again and again. Everything from little, DOS level defrag tools.
Right. Yeah,
or Windows 3.1, and here's this other thing. Oh, we need that. We need it now. Right. Can we buy you? Yes. You're in, boop, and then whoop.
Yeah.
That company is destroyed. Maybe some dev stayed, or they cash out, but they own the patent, or the whatever it is. Or they don't take our offer.
Smash them to death.
Smash them.
Yeah.
The browser wars are... Thinking of Fiat old stories, but so 1996, I want to say. I had just started at Microsoft. I'd been there for a little while, a year, and the Department of Justice sued Microsoft for antitrust, the browser wars, Netscape and the Mosaic stuff, and the judge at the time had determined that Microsoft was doing antitrust, corporate monopolistic stuff over the browser.
Right.
Functionally, and nowadays it seems kind of funny because it's just like Microsoft had an argument that browsing is just something innate to what we do anymore.
Right.
We're simply incorporated in everything we can. It's not a browser, it's the user experience on a computer or any device. I believed that, and at the time I was self-righteously, fuck Netscape.
Yeah.
Now back at the time though, and they're looking at stuff from well before that, what was happening before that? My God, Microsoft was the most ruthless, and there'd be emails out to the troops like, we are going to destroy this company.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we doing that other than just making a better product that people just use?
Right.
Without the war.
Correct.
And it's because Microsoft was late, and their product was subpar at the time, and bloated. And anyway, interesting to think about as far as success, how companies or people become successful and then talk about it later.
Right. Well, I mean, if you ask Bill Gates about that, I'm sure he's not going to talk about how ruthless a competitor they were and how anti-competitive their business practices were and how, I mean, he's never going to bring that up at the shareholder meeting, right? I don't think he's just going to sit around and thoughtfully reflect on his time as running this ruthless fucking pirate company that was just going around shelling everybody around him. But that's all corporations. I mean, that's life in the fiat world, and like Home Depot is a great example. Like they're even more sort of sneaky ruthless. Like let's say you're a guy that builds like some great new door handle. You go, hey, Home Depot comes along and goes, hey man, we saw your door handles and we'd like to make something. And you're Fritz, the door handle guy, and you've got this little operation set up in your garage, and you've got like 2 people working for you, and you can crank out like 1,000 door handles a month. And they go, that's great. We want 10,000 door handles a month. You go, oh my God, I can't make 10,000 a month. You go, well, take it or leave it, man. I mean, we're Home Depot. And you go, okay, fine. So you go to the bank, get a loan, say, hey, I need to build out productive capacity so I can fulfill this great big order from Home Depot. So you lever up, you increase your production capacity, you get to 10,000, and then about 6 months later, when they see you can deliver 10,000, they go, well, we really need 100,000. And you go, fudge, okay, now I'm going to go get a really big loan. I'm going to really build out my factory. Now I've got this humming factory. I've got 50 people working for me. All these people relying on me. I'm in debt up to my eyeballs, but I got this great contract with Home Depot. It's going to pay for it in 2 years. And then a year later, Home Depot says, we don't want to pay that much for doorknobs. We can only pay you $4 for doorknob. And you go, well, but we're not as profitable. I mean, it's going to, well, I mean, take it or leave it. You can stop selling us doorknobs anytime, buddy. And you go, well, I have to because I'm in debt up to my eyeballs and I can't service my debt. If I'm, okay, well, at least I can keep paying my debt. And then 6 months later, they go, we're only going to pay $250 for a doorknob. And you start going, that's my cost, man. Like, I can't, how am I supposed to service my debt? Well, we'll keep it going. I don't want to lay people. Well, I guess I'll lay a couple people off, and that'll keep our margins up, and that way I can da-da-da-da-da. And then they come along and say, well, we're only paying $1. And you sit there going, but I can't make anything then. They go, well, okay, we're going to cancel the contract. And you go, but I'm going to be out of business. And then about a month later, they come back and go, well, we'll buy your business for 50% of what it's worth. And it's just enough for you to pay off your loan and maybe put some money in your pocket.
Okay. And you'll probably make out all right, but it's not yours anymore.
Well, it's gone. So you took all the risk. You paid for all the development. You went into all kinds of debt. You did this, that, and the other thing. Maybe they don't even pay you out enough to pay off the debt. Maybe they just let you go bankrupt, and then they come buy you fire sale. And then they get the doorknobs they wanted that they get to produce at cost. And you just get fucked. Right.
So with Hanlon's razor, would you say, like I would say with Hanlon's razor, is it ill intent or incompetence or kind of just,
well, it's the incentive structure.
Incentives. So with Microsoft, I'd say, there was ill intent there. Knowing going into these things, this is how we do it, and it's ruthless. With Home Depot, would you say it's like there's that intent?
Well, I would argue that the Microsoft and Home Depot were both functions of the incentive structure and largely more like incompetence, right? Like, and by incompetence, I don't mean gross incompetence, like they don't know how to run a company. It's more incompetence of like, we don't have enough information to make a logical decision about who wants what kind of doorknob. Mm. So when they see an opportunity, the incentive is to go, hey, these guys are selling more doorknobs than we are. That's a problem for us because they're going to put us out of the doorknob business. We want to have doorknobs to sell. We want people buying doorknobs from us, and we can run margins that are, 2%. We can do great. This guy has to run margins 50%. We can just fucking wipe them out and get doorknobs that we want. So the incompetence is the business structure of Home Depot, which is like this big, huge conglomerate that is economies of scale and yada, yada, yada. But that's because the incentive structure creates businesses like that because you can't stay competitive. As someone increases their economies of scale, if you're smaller, you cannot keep up with that economy of scale. They're sooner or later going to be able to price you out, right? So even with Microsoft, you can say, well, it's ill intent. They're going to crush other people. I can say, well, that was an incompetent company to begin with. They made subpar software that they stole, essentially, like the Xerox thing and all that kind of stuff.
Well, the early DOS stuff, there was documented code in there that was like, and they skirted around it legally, like, no, in the contract we get to keep this, and they had basically done a contract for IBM, I think, and then like, oh no, by the way, no, we keep this code.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Hold on.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I thought that was ours. Nope. We have it.
Sorry, ours now. And the thing is, they came from failure. I mean, my dad met those guys in the 70s. They had set up a shop in New Mexico. And,
that's right. Their early headquarters was it Albuquerque?
Yeah,
it was Albuquerque. That's right.
So my dad was a tech guy back in the day, and he worked for the National Laboratory there in Albuquerque. And he went down to meet these guys, and they were selling a calculator of all things. He said it was about the size of a shoebox, and it did basic calculation functions. And they were all proud of this thing. This was going to be their big thing. It was going to make Microsoft the Microsoft calculator. And he said they had a separate box that was also the size of a fucking shoebox that you'd have to plug into it to do engineering functions, like cosines and all that kind of stuff, right? So you had this two shoebox size calculator, and they went, this is it, we're going to get rich. And then later that same year, Hewlett-Packard came out with the pocket calculator that has all the engineering functions and everything built in, fit right in your pocket.
Semiconductors.
Yeah, so, the Microsoft 2 shoebox size calculator went right out the window just because of technology. So, I mean, that was their initial, introduction into the world of tech. Absolute catastrophe.
They got super lucky back in the day, too.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
But once you start building on top of something that's functionally broken, like DOS 3.1, all that shit, that was garbage, dude. Like, it was absolute fucking ass using those things. And I remember distinctly, like, even when
I cut my teeth on DOS 4, I think.
Yeah. Well, but, I mean, even as you started getting into the iterations of 95, 98, like, everybody from that period of time has a memory of click, 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 click. No, oh, God, fuck, when was the last time I saved? Oh, no. It's a bit, oh, my God, fuck. And then you open the thing up and you go, oh, that was great, that's awesome. I just wasted 4 fucking hours of work.
Sure.
And I have no idea what I was doing.
I had a college paper I lost that way. I was just like, oh, my God. I almost dropped out of school. I was so...
Yeah.
I recovered, but it was work.
Yeah, tons and tons and tons of work. And it was just always, like, I think I got this ironed out, and they're always coming with little patches and all this bullshit. I remember when Windows NT came out, I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to NT, because at least it's somewhat stable. And, but if you think about, like, their server software was so fucking unstable, it was such a fucking nightmare to use. Like, how do they ever capture market share? And so it's a lot of stumbling through and luck and packing things up and making deals and yada, yada, yada. But so if you say, how did Microsoft become so anti-competitive? Was it incompetence or was it ill intent? Well, it's incompetence from the start. It's just, if you take an incompetent product and then you gain market share from it through clever marketing and whatnot, how are you going to hang on to your incompetent product when there's upstarts? Well, the only thing you can do is go smash them. Because if we let these people start competing with us, we're going to get fucked.
Yeah. So
let's just start batting the competitors away. And then as they keep growing and they go, well, we'll throw some more money at it until we figure the problem out. Well, now Windows is a pretty stable system. It's, completely different, obviously.
Although I will not run, well, no, I do run Bitcoin Core on a Windows machine, but for
Linux,
stuff.
maybe.
But yeah, so I run a node on Linux because it won't reboot on me and do updates on me. Right. On my Windows machine, I run a Bitcoin Core just so I can interact in a UI that I'm fairly familiar with and do other stuff. But I can't tell you how many times I've gone to that machine and I'm like, oh, thanks. You rebooted on me for some update overnight that I don't need anything to do for Bitcoin.
Right.
And I got to start Bitcoin back up and it's got to sync again. And meanwhile, it's not been syncing. And it's like, okay, thanks, Windows. Right. So I run that. I run my other node on Linux. But so my most of my functional world is in the Windows universe. I've contemplated Apple. I just have never dove in that direction.
Well, I wouldn't run Core on Apple.
I mean, not for Bitcoin, but for
Well, I actually appreciate the Apple ecosystem, and I swore up and down I would never buy another Windows machine again because I was running Windows 7, and I had a computer from probably 1995. I would transfer hard drive information. I would deprecate an old computer, but I'd just take the hard drive out, copy all that information over to a new hard drive, and have an external that had this, and then rinse and repeat. And and I used to do logical volumes, and I would incorporate those things into the logical volume, and then I'd just transfer the information to the logical volume, and then have that hard drive become the new hard drive, et cetera, et cetera. Just bouncing my data along right up until, my laptop was older, but I kept getting this relentless upgrade to Windows, I think it was 10 from 7, Just relentless.
They're doing that now with 11. It's like, stop.
Yeah, just
it works.
Fuck off. I'm not fucking with you. And so much so that I called Windows Tech Support and said, hey man, this thing keeps prompting me to upgrade. I don't know if my computer can take this. Oh, yeah, it's totally fine. I'll look up your model. Oh, yeah, it's totally fine, yada, 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 yada. I was like, all right, fine. Called my brother-in-law who worked at Microsoft at the time. Do you think that, oh, yeah, you'll be fine. It's no problem. You can just back out of it and install. Fuck. You fucking assholes. Like, you need to update drivers and this and the other thing. Oh, we don't make drivers. So, oh, you don't have any compatible drivers for that. Oh, that hardware is completely incompatible. You
and things are slower.
Well, I couldn't ever get it to run.
Oh, really?
And so as I'm trying to back out of it, and then I'm calling them, and they're just like, oh, it should have worked. Well, it fucking doesn't, dickhead. Like, this is my world right now. And somewhere in the process, and this is my incompetence, as I was cycling through these drives, trying to, like, put the old disk image back on and do all this kind of shit, I ended up taking my drive that had 15 years of stuff backed up on it and started overwriting it. Wait, no. Oh, fuck. So 15 years of data just gone. I mean, it was recoverable, some of it. Like, I didn't get it all back, but, you know, I stopped the write process in enough time that I had some recoverable media on there. Or no, that's not even true. I completely wrote the drive and gave it enough space to put the new Windows image on there. And then whatever was left was like these little fragments of shit that I was able to reconstruct with a disk recovery thing. But fuck, man, like, I was so furious after that. I said, never again. I'm never, ever.
Oh, it's painful. And I have done that with Linux. I had a Red Hat version, 20 years ago or something. I was updating and going to run Windows in a little shell and made a mistake counting the partitions. I was setting it up. And
oopsie doodle.
Oops, I should have started counting at 0, not at 1. And I overwrote the wrong partition and lost a bunch of data. And that was all on me. It wasn't like, oh, no, this is going to be great. You're going to love it. Click. Fuck. You can back out.
Yeah.
Look. It was all on me. It was a Linux thing. But I hate that. And when we say incompetence, it's sort of like, it sounds harsh. We're only humans. Basically, humans, I think, are inherently incompetent about a lot of things. And it's just not being judgmental. It's just the incompetence part is smart people, like early Microsoft guys. They build this whole machine. I mean, they have to be really smart people, and they build this stuff. And, you know, you could judge it, but they're smart people doing their best of the time. And in the span of things, it's, you know, on the Hanlon's raising, it falls into an incompetence area. But
I would argue. I mean, the thing is, if you can look at it easily and say, well, there's ill intent here, and you can also look at it from the other perspective of, like, they started off in deep incompetence, and not incompetence in that they're not smart or that they're not capable. It's just the thing that they lucked into turned out to be highly unstable. And so when you start, and then you start adding the bean counters in there, and they start saying, like, hey, we need more profits, and we need to do this, and the shareholders are bitching about this, and we need to have growth, and yada, yada, yada. And so you start having all these pressures. I don't think there was, you know, this cabal of evil people sitting around the Microsoft boardroom going, how can we destroy all competitors because we just like the idea of destroying people, right?
They know what works, and it's like, by golly, the way they marketed Windows 95 and all that, it was like they knew it was kind of dog food and it had all these issues, but if they didn't launch now and soon, they were going to lose behind other competing forces, Apple and stuff.
Right.
So they rolled it out, and they just knew they'd clean it up and fix it as they went, and that's been constant ever since.
But that's all.
But it's like
companies.
At the expense of, we know we could improve and fix all this stuff, but we're just going to move forward with something else because we got Windows 95.
Right.
And you buy on marketing. So.
Right, correct. And when it comes time to do the evil option, I mean, if you're looking at a company and you go, well, we can lay off 1,000 people, that's not great. That's not going to help the shareholders. Or we can go this other way. Well, that would be the right thing to do, is to let, you know, Netscape come along, because they have a better browser now, like, no doubt about it. Yeah, but we're going to end up laying off 500 people. 500 people are going to be out of a job. Our shareholders are going to take a shit. And that could start a death spiral for us. Is it worth it to collapse your company so you can play fair? No. Yeah, well, you know, how many people work in Netscape? 25. How many of them can we give a job to? 10. Yeah, on balance, that's better. We can lose 500. 500 high-paying jobs can go away from the Seattle-Redmond area. or 10 people in Netscape have to figure out something else to do, and they'll be fine. Yeah, smash Netscape. Right,
For sure. If they even care.
Well, I'm certain, like I said, I don't think these are inherently evil people. There's calculations to be made, and if you're making that calculus, and you go, well, and that's just a calculus that they're making. That's not all of them, but maybe there was some guy that just loved smashing little tech startups. I don't know. I think it's more likely that they're saying, hey, man, we need to protect our market share. We have a responsibility to shareholders. This is a little bit of dirty pool, but we're also making them an offer. It's not like we're just smashing them first. We're saying, hey, man, it's not a great offer. If they weren't greedy, they would take it.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't. They go, well, no, we're going to topple Microsoft. Oops.
Well, and internally to Microsoft as well, my experience was often that internally it was an intellectual venture type umbrella organization that had multiple teams competing and working on very similar or even the same stuff, right. And to see how internal teams panned out against each other, whether that was market and consumer interests or just the better team. Yeah. And you could be working in a team knowing that there was this other team doing something very similar, and you saw where this was going. Right. And you're all Microsoft, but if your team or your product wasn't the one that panned out, you were interviewing internally to keep your job.
Right. You're getting deprecated.
Yeah. there was always that pressure.
Right.
Internal to a team itself, they had a scoring system that was like there's only so many points to dole out in a team.
Right.
And on average, you're short.
Right. So
it created this internal competition with other people where if somebody it was a numbered system, but if somebody got an A-, somebody was getting a C+.
Right.
And if you got a C+ or 2, you might be having to interview at another team.
Right.
And it created this pressure on teams generally that, hey, not to call it calculus, it gives it too much credit. It's like basic arithmetic that is like, hey, product unit manager, you only have so many points. And we know you're going to have some dead wood or less fresh wood on your team. Right. There was always this pressure to say, who isn't performing as much as these other geniuses? Right. I was sort of an average, above average employee, but very dedicated. I slept at work. I worked long hours. And, man, when it was crunch time, it was 80 hours a week easy.
Yeah.
Knowing that I could crank and get like a B+ or A.
Right.
And I'd be like, holy cow, how long can I do this work?
Yeah.
And you can do it. I know guys that are still there that do that.
Right. But
their mindset or maybe their interests are different than mine were. And for me, what I experienced was a kind of burnout. I was like, what am I doing? And when the .com thing all hit and blew up and the DOJ lawsuit happened, and I was looking at that from a slightly outside perspective going, Microsoft is a little ruthless or lying about some stuff here too. Yeah. I had to think about that, and when the stock price dropped from 120 to like 66 in 2 weeks, there was a lot of people reevaluating their careers.
Oh, for sure.
What am I doing working this hard on this grading point system for a salary, and my stock options aren't going to make me a millionaire in 10 years?
Right.
There was a brain drain that happened, and that. And at the time, there were also places to go. Google was coming, and
there's all kinds of stuff at the time.
Stuff was startups. I remember prominent people pop into like one of the head of the media, what was it? Interactive Media Group, up and just started WebMD, and did great. And that's kind of garbage now, but at the time, it was like, holy cow! People were off and doing their own thing. Yeah. One of the big things that pushed me out of Microsoft was like, what am I doing? And for what? And at the time, not that I thought about it the same way, but it was like time preference and fiat thinking versus long-term happiness and goals. And like, do I need to be slaving away here? Is it the money?
Yeah, right.
Or is it my personal growth and sanity?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, funny stories. How long have we been going here? I can't tell.
Hour and 40 minutes. I think this is pretty good.
Yeah. Good podcast.
Yeah.
Good talks. So,
covered everything.
Pretty
sure we fixed the world, so.
I'm all out of ideas today. Yeah. You're welcome, everybody. Thanks. We'll catch you next time.